London, 1845. The carriage wheels rattled against cobblestones as a fine mist of rain descended upon the city. Inside, Theresa Huntington clutched the crumpled letter in her trembling hands, reading it for the 7th time, though the words remained unchanged. I cannot in good conscience proceed with our arrangement. Our temperaments are ill-suited, and I have made alternative arrangements for my future. You are released from our engagement. Regards, Lord William Pembroke. 8 days before their wedding, 8 days before she would have been Lady Pembroke. Now she was simply Miss Huntington, abandoned, humiliated, and without prospects. Miss, the driver's voice interrupted her thoughts. We've arrived at Berkeley Square. Theresa smoothed her slate-grey travelling dress and gathered her composure. She would not allow tears, not here in the heart of Mayfair, where gossip travelled faster than carriages. She tucked the letter into her reticule and stepped down onto wet pavement. Her aunt's townhouse loomed before her, an intimidating 4-story edifice of Portland stone that had always made Theresa feel small. Now it would be her sanctuary or her prison. After the scandal of a broken engagement, she could hardly return to Hampshire to face her neighbours' whispers. "You're finally here," her aunt, Lady Agatha Wilmington, declared from the doorway. "Come inside before anyone sees you. The scandal sheets already hint at your disgrace." Theresa flinched at the word disgrace. Was that what she was now? A disgraced woman, abandoned by her betrothed, her future shattered like fine china dropped on marble floors. "I came as soon as I received your summons, Aunt," Theresa said, stepping into the grand foyer with its black and white checkered marble floor. "Well, it's fortunate I still maintain a residence in town. Your father's cottage in Hampshire is no place for damage control." Lady Agatha examined Theresa with critical eyes. "You've lost weight. Men dislike skeletal women. Perhaps that's why Lord Pembroke—" "Please, Aunt," Theresa interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. "I prefer not to discuss his reasons." Lady Agatha's eyebrows rose. "We most certainly will discuss them, but first tea. You look half frozen." In the drawing-room, with its heavy damask curtains and ornate furnishings, Theresa sipped Earl Grey while her aunt outlined the circumstances of her new life. Society has a short memory for some scandals, but a jilted bride, that requires careful management. You'll remain here for the season. We'll craft a narrative that you dissolved the engagement upon discovering unpleasant truths about Lord Pembroke. "But that would be a lie," Theresa protested. "It's a necessary fiction. The alternative is to be forever marked as the woman not good enough to secure her betrothal." Not good enough. The words resonated with a truth Theresa had always suspected. Wasn't that why her father had been so eager to marry her off to the first suitable gentleman who expressed interest? At 22, with no remarkable beauty or extraordinary accomplishments, she had been fortunate to receive any offer. "Your father's modest income barely maintains your family's genteel status," Lady Agatha continued. "Your brothers require connections for their military careers, and your younger sister must make a good match. The disgrace of your broken engagement affects them all." The weight of responsibility settled over Theresa like a shroud. Her family's future had partially depended on her advantageous marriage. Now she had failed them. "What would you have me do?" she asked softly. "You will attend select gatherings, nothing too prominent at first. You will be dignified, never revealing a hint of heartbreak. And you will consider any suitable gentleman who shows interest." "You wish me to pursue another match so soon?" Lady Agatha set down her teacup with a decisive clink. "That is precisely what you must do. Love is a luxury few can afford, Theresa. Security, position, respectability, these are what matter. Your romantic notions about marriage are childish fantasies." Perhaps her aunt was right. Perhaps love was only for those with fortune and status, those who could afford the luxury of choice. For women like Theresa, genteel but not wealthy, marriage was a business arrangement, a path to security. "The season begins in earnest next week," Lady Agatha said. "I've arranged for new gowns, nothing too fashionable but suitable. You'll need to practice your conversation. No mentions of poetry or philosophy. Men want pleasant companionship, not opinions." Theresa nodded, accepting her role in this carefully choreographed dance of society. She would become what was expected, agreeable, undemanding, grateful for any respectable offer. Her own desires for companionship, understanding, perhaps even affection, were irrelevant luxuries. That night in the austere guest chamber that would be her home for the coming months, Theresa removed a small portrait from her valise, her parents on their wedding day. Her mother's eyes held a sadness Theresa had never understood as a child. Now she wondered if her mother had made the same calculations, traded dreams for security. "I will do better," she whispered to the empty room. "I will expect nothing, and then I cannot be disappointed." The following days passed in a whirlwind of preparations. The modiste came with fabric samples for day dresses and evening gowns. The hairdresser demonstrated fashionable styles that might flatter Theresa's ordinary brown hair. A dance master reviewed the latest variations of the quadrille and waltz. Through it all, Theresa maintained a composed exterior while her insides twisted with anxiety. She'd never excelled at social gatherings, preferring books to ballrooms. How would she navigate the treacherous waters of London society, especially now, when people would be watching for signs of her humiliation? "Stand straighter," Lady Agatha instructed as they prepared for their first social call. "Remember, you chose to end the engagement. You have nothing to be ashamed of." The Hartley tea reception would be a modest beginning, mostly older society matrons who controlled access to more prestigious events. Theresa wore a high-necked dress of cornflower blue that her aunt deemed appropriate without being memorable. As they entered the Hartleys' modest drawing room, conversation dimmed momentarily. Theresa felt eyes assessing her, measuring her worth against the gossip they'd consumed. "Lady Wilmington, how delightful," Mrs. Hartley greeted them. Her gaze shifted to Theresa. "And Miss Huntington. We had not expected to see you in London this season." The implication hung in the air. Surely a jilted bride would hide away in shame. "My niece prefers the stimulation of town to country hibernation," Lady Agatha replied smoothly. "Especially after making such a fortunate escape from an unsuitable connection." The lie tasted bitter in Theresa's mouth, but she forced a serene smile. "Indeed, aunt. One cannot be too careful when contemplating a lifetime commitment." Mrs. Hartley's expression revealed both disappointment at being denied juicier details and reluctant approval of Theresa's composure. "Well, you must meet everyone. Lady Pemberton was just telling us about her nephew's hunting accident." As Theresa circulated through the room, she maintained her mask of calm dignity while collecting snippets of conversation about herself. "Quite plain, isn't she? No wonder he reconsidered. I heard he found her utterly dull, can barely play the pianoforte and reads too many books. Well, Pembroke is already paying court to the Simmons girl. £20,000 and connections to the Duke of Harrington." Each barb lodged in Theresa's heart, confirming her deepest fears. She was inadequate in beauty, in accomplishments, in fortune. William had simply realized what everyone else already knew. By the time they departed, Theresa's cheeks ached from maintaining her smile, but Lady Agatha seemed satisfied. "You comported yourself well. Mrs. Hartley has invited us to her card party next week, and Lady Pemberton mentioned her musical evening." "Do you truly believe we can overcome the scandal?" Theresa asked as their carriage navigated the crowded streets. "Scandal becomes truly damaging only when one behaves as if scandalized. You will act as though you've done nothing wrong, and eventually, perception will align with that reality." Lady Agatha adjusted her gloves. "Besides, there is already a new rumor about Lady Fairchild's daughter eloping with her drawing master." Theresa gazed out the carriage window at fashionable Londoners strolling through Berkeley Square. "And what of Lord Pembroke? Will I be expected to socialize with him and his new interest?" "Eventually, yes. A cutting remark delivered with a smile will serve you better than avoidance." Lady Agatha's tone softened slightly. "I know this is difficult, Theresa, but you must remember that a woman in your position cannot afford wounded pride. Practicality must prevail." That evening, a note arrived from Lady Pemberton, inviting them to a small dinner party the following night. Lady Agatha declared it a triumph. Their reintegration into society was proceeding faster than expected. "The guest list will be select, but influential," she said, scanning the elegant invitation. Wear your sage green silk. It gives some color to your complexion. Theresa nodded obediently, though her stomach churned at the thought of another performance. How many dinners, teas, and balls would she endure before her disgrace was forgotten? How many calculated smiles and strategic conversations before she might find another gentleman willing to overlook her failed engagement? And was that truly all she could hope for, to be tolerated rather than cherished? The Pemberton dinner proved more challenging than the tea reception. Here, the guests were younger, more fashionable, and decidedly more interested in romantic entanglements. Theresa found herself seated between an elderly baron who spoke exclusively about his gout, and a young military officer clearly disappointed not to be placed near one of the more beautiful debutantes. "Miss Huntington, I understand you recently returned from Hampshire," the officer, Captain Finlay, said with polite resignation. "Yes, though London has always been a second home," she replied, repeating the narrative Lady Agatha had constructed. "I heard you were engaged to Pembroke. Surprising that you'd end things so close to the wedding." The directness of his statement momentarily silenced her. She reached for her water glass, buying time to compose a response. "Sometimes clarity comes at inconvenient moments, Captain," she finally said. "Better a broken engagement than an unhappy marriage." From across the table, a deep voice interjected. "An uncommonly sensible philosophy, Miss Huntington." Theresa looked up to meet the most penetrating gaze she had ever encountered. The speaker was a tall gentleman with dark hair and striking features that stopped just short of conventional handsomeness. There was something compelling in his direct assessment, as though he saw beyond her carefully crafted facade. "Duke, you surprise me," their hostess said. "I thought you considered matrimony the foundation of society." "The Duke?" Theresa scanned her memory of the introductions. The Duke of Northbrook, that was it. Nicholas Northwood, a man notorious for his exacting standards and unwavering principles. At perhaps 35, he was somewhat older than most unmarried peers, and reportedly indifferent to the parade of debutantes presented for his consideration each season. "I consider honest marriages the foundation of society, Lady Pemberton," he replied. "Mutual respect and compatibility create stronger unions than mere social convenience." His gaze returned to Theresa, and she felt a strange, fluttering sensation. Was he mocking her, offering support? His expression revealed nothing beyond polite interest. "How refreshing to hear a gentleman express such views," she said carefully, "though I imagine your position affords you more freedom of choice than most." Something like appreciation flickered in his eyes. "Position confers options, Miss Huntington, but not immunity from consequence. Every choice carries its burden, regardless of one's title." The conversation shifted to safer topics: the upcoming exhibition at the Royal Academy, plans for the summer horse races, but Theresa remained aware of the Duke's occasional glance in her direction. Unlike the pitying or assessing looks she'd endured from others, his gaze seemed evaluative in a different way, as though he were solving a puzzle. Later, as the gentlemen rejoined the ladies after their port, the Duke approached her where she stood examining a small landscape painting. "Atkinson Grimshaw," he said, nodding toward the artwork. "His treatment of light is unparalleled." "I admire how he captures the mystery of evening," Theresa replied. "The liminal space between day and night." The Duke raised an eyebrow. "You have an interest in art, Miss Huntington." "I have an interest in beauty," she answered honestly, "in all its forms. Yet society would have us believe that beauty exists only within narrowly defined parameters." He gestured subtly toward a cluster of debutantes in nearly identical pale gowns. "Conventional wisdom often lacks imagination." Was he referring to her situation? Theresa couldn't decipher his meaning, but something about his presence made her feel more substantial, less like the ghost of scandal she'd become. "Conventional wisdom serves those who establish the conventions," she said, surprising herself with her boldness. He smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed his austere features. "Precisely so, Miss Huntington. One wonders what wisdom might emerge if conventions were occasionally set aside." Before she could respond, Lady Agatha appeared at her side, her expression a mixture of surprise and calculation. "Your Grace, I see you've met my niece." Indeed, Lady Wilmington, Miss Huntington has been enlightening me on artistic theory. His tone was perfectly proper, yet Theresa detected an undercurrent of amusement. How delightful, Lady Agatha replied. Theresa has always been fond of cultural pursuits. The slight pause spoke volumes. Cultural pursuits were acceptable as accomplishments, but dangerous as passions for young ladies seeking husbands. A quality to be commended, the Duke said. Too many conversations in these settings barely rise above comments on the weather. After he moved on to speak with other guests, Lady Agatha gripped Theresa's arm. The Duke of Northbrook conversing with you at length, this is unexpected. He was merely being polite, aunt. The Duke is never merely polite. He speaks when he has something to say and remains silent otherwise. Lady Agatha assessed Theresa with new consideration. What exactly did you discuss? Art conventions, nothing of consequence. Well, don't develop expectations. The Duke has avoided matrimony for years despite being pursued by the most eligible young ladies in England. Still, his notice will elevate your standing. As they departed that evening, Theresa found herself scanning the departing guests for a glimpse of the Duke's tall figure. She couldn't explain her interest. Surely a man of his position would never seriously consider someone like her, especially now, tainted by scandal. Yet their brief exchange had awakened something dormant within her, a sense that perhaps she was not invisible, not merely a failure to be managed and remarried. The evening exceeded my expectations, Lady Agatha declared as their carriage pulled away. Lady Pemberton has invited us to her garden party next week, and I noticed Mrs. Crawford introducing her son to you. He's not brilliant, but he has a comfortable estate in Derbyshire. Theresa nodded absently, her thoughts lingering on dark, perceptive eyes and a conversation that had made her feel, for a moment, like herself rather than a social construct. You're not attending to me, Lady Agatha chided. This is precisely the scattered attention that likely contributed to Lord Pembroke's change of heart. The criticism strung, reinforcing Theresa's core belief. She was fundamentally inadequate, unworthy of genuine regard. William had simply recognized this truth before legally binding himself to her mediocrity. Forgive me, aunt. I was reflecting on the evening's lessons. Good. Remember, our objective is to secure another match, perhaps not as advantageous as Pembroke, but respectable. You must focus on this goal with absolute dedication. In the days that followed, Theresa accompanied her aunt to a succession of social events, each carefully selected to rebuild her reputation without exposing her to overly critical scrutiny. She performed her role with increasing skill, presenting a composed exterior while maintaining emotional distance from everyone she encountered. She did not see the Duke again, which was for the best. Their conversation had been a momentary diversion, nothing more. She would do well to focus on more attainable prospects, like Mr. Crawford, who had indeed called upon them and invited Theresa for a drive in the park. He's not especially handsome, Lady Agatha conceded as they prepared for the outing, but he has 4,000 a year and no scandals attached to his name. Consider what questions to ask about his estate. Men appreciate a woman's interest in their property. Mr. Crawford proved to be a pleasant, if somewhat dull, companion. He spoke at length about his horses, his plans to modernize his tenant farms, and his mother's preference for town life. Mother says a wife should be sensible above all, he remarked as they traveled the fashionable paths of Hyde Park. Beauty fades, but good sense is enduring. Your mother sounds very practical, Theresa replied, understanding his implication. She was being evaluated not as a beauty, she would fail such assessment, but as a sensible choice. She is, and she approves of you, Miss Huntington. She says you show restraint in dress and manner. He glanced at her plain blue bonnet with apparent approval. Is that all I am now? Theresa wondered. A sensible choice because I don't expect too much. You're very kind, she said aloud, as is your mother. As they rounded a bend in the path, their carriage passed another, more elegant equipage. Inside sat the Duke of Northbrook, engaged in conversation with an elegantly dressed older gentleman. The Duke glanced up, his eyes meeting Theresa's for a brief moment before he nodded in acknowledgement. The Duke, Mr. Crawford said, his tone respectful but not awed. Mother says he's unlikely to ever marry. too particular by half. Perhaps he values quality over convenience, Theresa suggested, then immediately regretted her words. They could be interpreted as critical of Mr. Crawford's pragmatic approach, but he merely chuckled. That's the privilege of his position, I suppose. The rest of us must make reasonable compromises. The rest of us. The phrase echoed in Theresa's mind. Was that her destiny, to be among the rest, those who settled for reasonable compromises rather than genuine connection? The notion followed her through the next several social engagements. Mr. Crawford called again. Lady Agatha spoke favorably of his interest. Theresa prepared herself to accept the possibility of a life defined by sensible choices and modest expectations. Then came Lady Pemberton's garden party, an event substantial enough to mark Theresa's official re-emergence into society's good graces. The Pemberton estate on the outskirts of London boasted extensive grounds, and the afternoon weather proved ideal for outdoor entertainment. "Remember to smile," Lady Agatha instructed as they made their entrance. "And if you encounter Lord Pembroke, a brief acknowledgement is sufficient. Show neither resentment nor excessive warmth." Theresa's heart pounded at the thought of facing William, but she maintained her composure. "Yes, Aunt." The gardens were magnificent, roses in full bloom, perfectly manicured lawns, and secluded arbors for intimate conversation. Guests strolled the pathways or gathered near the refreshment pavilion, where musicians played gentle melodies. Theresa had just accepted a glass of lemonade when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Miss Huntington, what a pleasant surprise." She turned to find the Duke of Northbrook, regarding her with that same penetrating gaze that had unsettled her at the dinner party. "Your Grace," she curtsied, "though I can't imagine my presence is surprising, as we were both invited." A smile touched his lips. "The surprise is in finding you alone, given your recent popularity among certain gentlemen." "Popularity would be an overstatement," she replied. "Mere politeness, more likely." "You underestimate yourself." He gestured toward the garden paths. "Would you care to walk? These events become tedious without occasional movement." Theresa hesitated, aware that accepting might draw attention. Yet something compelled her to nod. A brief turn around the rose garden would be welcome. As they strolled side by side, maintaining a proper distance, Theresa sensed curious glances from other guests. The Duke, either oblivious or indifferent to the attention, maintained a conversational tone. "I understand you recently returned from Hampshire. Do you prefer country life to London society?" "Each has its merits," she answered carefully. "The country offers peace and natural beauty, while town provides cultural stimulation." "A diplomatic response," he observed. "I wonder what you might say if convention didn't dictate caution in all exchanges." The challenge in his tone prompted her to candor. "Very well. The country allows me to be myself, to read without concern for appearing too scholarly, to walk for hours without worrying about mud on my hem, to think without interruption. London requires constant performance." He nodded, seemingly pleased by her honesty. "The performance exhausts, doesn't it? The calculated remarks, the strategic alliances, the careful concealment of genuine feeling." "You speak as one who finds it equally tiresome," she observed. "I've earned the privilege of occasional bluntness through the accident of birth and title. You, however, navigate more treacherous waters." They paused near a trellis of climbing roses, their rich scent sweetening the air. Theresa studied the Duke's profile, strong, dignified, uncompromising. "Why did you invite me to walk, Your Grace?" He turned to face her fully. "Because you interest me, Miss Huntington. You maintain the appearance society demands, while harboring thoughts that would scandalize half the matrons in this garden. You presume much based on limited acquaintance. I observe. It's a habit developed through years of being observed myself." He plucked a pale pink rose from the trellis and offered it to her. "People reveal themselves in small ways, a comment about art, a glance at a passing carriage, the set of their shoulders when maintaining a fiction." Theresa accepted the rose, her fingers brushing his momentarily. "And what fiction do you believe I maintain?" "That you are reconciled to being judged by standards you find hollow." His voice lowered. that you accept the narrative of your own inadequacy." The accuracy of his assessment startled her into silence. How could he know the very core of her self-doubt? Was it so transparent, or was he unusually perceptive? Before she could formulate a response, a commotion near the main lawn caught their attention. Guests were gathering, voices raised in excitement. "It appears Lady Pemberton has arranged some entertainment," the Duke said. "Shall we investigate?" They joined the assembling crowd just as Lady Pemberton announced a display of archery, with guests invited to demonstrate their skill. Several gentlemen stepped forward, including, Theresa noticed with a jolt, Lord William Pembroke. He stood tall and handsome in his perfectly tailored coat, golden hair gleaming in the afternoon sun. On his arm was a petite blonde woman whom Theresa recognized as Miss Simmons, the heiress he now courted. "Ah," the Duke murmured beside her. "Your former betrothed, I presume." "Yes," Theresa whispered, fighting the wave of humiliation that threatened to engulf her. William hadn't seen her yet, but when he did, would he smirk, ignore her, offer insincere pleasantries? "Miss Huntington," the Duke's voice drew her attention back to him. "Would you consider a small act of rebellion?" "I beg your pardon." "Archery is a sport at which I've seen many accomplished ladies excel. The conventional wisdom suggests you should retreat to the background in Lord Pembroke's presence. I propose the opposite strategy." Understanding dawned. "You suggest I participate in the archery contest before everyone." "I suggest you demonstrate that your worth is not diminished by one man's poor judgment." His eyes held a challenge. "Unless you're unskilled with a bow." In truth, archery had been one of Theresa's few physical accomplishments. Her father's estate bordered a small wood, and she had practiced for years, finding satisfaction in the discipline and precision required. "I am reasonably proficient," she admitted. "Then allow me to escort you forward when Lady Pemberton calls for female participants." He offered his arm. A small rebellion, but perhaps a meaningful one. Her heart raced at the prospect. To display herself so publicly, to invite comparison with Miss Simmons, to risk failure before William and all of society, it terrified her. Yet the alternative, shrinking away, confirming everyone's assessment of her insignificance, suddenly seemed equally unbearable. "Very well," she said, taking his arm, "a small rebellion." When Lady Pemberton invited ladies to try their skill, Theresa stepped forward with the Duke beside her. A ripple of whispers swept through the crowd as William finally noticed her. His expression shifted from shock to discomfort to forced politeness. "Miss Huntington will participate," the Duke announced, his commanding tone silencing the murmurs. Lady Pemberton recovered quickly. "How delightful. We have 3 ladies brave enough to demonstrate their skill, Mrs. Blackwood, Miss Simmons, and Miss Huntington." The targets were set at a modest distance, appropriate for ladies' participation. Mrs. Blackwood, a middle-aged woman known for her sporting enthusiasm, went first, landing her arrow respectably near the center. Miss Simmons followed, giggling nervously as William helped position her arms. Her arrow barely struck the outer ring of the target, but the crowd applauded politely. Then it was Theresa's turn. She approached the line, aware of every eye upon her. The bow felt familiar in her hands, a connection to her true self, the woman who existed beyond society's judgments. "Remember who you are," the Duke said quietly from behind her. She knocked the arrow, drew back the string with steady hands, and focused on the target. In that moment, William and Miss Simmons faded from importance. The whispers and expectations receded. There was only Theresa, the bow, and the distant circle. She released the arrow. It flew straight and true, embedding itself in the innermost ring, just shy of the center. Perfect silence followed, then scattered applause that grew into general approval. "Remarkable shot, Miss Huntington," Lady Pemberton declared. "We have an unexpected champion." As Theresa turned away from the target, she caught William's expression, a mixture of surprise and reassessment that gave her more satisfaction than she cared to admit. But it was the Duke's approving nod that warmed her most. "Well done," he said when she rejoined him. "Not merely rebellion, but excellence." The remainder of the afternoon passed in a blur of heightened awareness. People who had previously overlooked Theresa now approached with congratulations and conversation. Lady Agatha observed these developments with cautious approval. though she later cautioned Theresa against appearing too accomplished, as gentlemen dislike being outshone. As they prepared to depart, the Duke approached them once more. "Lady Wilmington, Miss Huntington, I wonder if you might honor me by attending a small musicale at Northbrook House next Thursday evening. Just a few appreciative guests for an Italian soprano I'm sponsoring." Lady Agatha's surprise was evident, though she masked it quickly. "We would be delighted, Your Grace. How kind of you to include us." "Not kindness, Lady Wilmington, but self-interest. I find your niece's conversation stimulating." He bowed over Theresa's hand. "Until Thursday, Miss Huntington." In the carriage ride home, Lady Agatha's excitement overrode her usual composure. "The Duke of Northbrook inviting us specifically. This changes everything, Theresa." "Surely he's merely being courteous," Theresa protested, though her pulse quickened at the memory of his approval. "The Duke is never merely courteous," Lady Agatha repeated her earlier assessment. "He is selective in his social engagements and even more selective in his attention." She studied Theresa with new interest. "Perhaps your unconventional qualities appeal to him." "You advised me to hide those qualities," Theresa pointed out. "For ordinary gentlemen, yes, but the Duke, he can afford to indulge eccentricity." Lady Agatha tapped her fan against her palm. "We must ensure your appearance is perfect for the musicale. The blue silk, I think, with the pearl combs for your hair." Theresa listened to her aunt's plans with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The Duke's interest seemed genuine, but what did it signify? Surely not courtship. The disparity in their positions was too great, especially given her recent disgrace. Perhaps he merely found her an interesting diversion from more conventional society ladies. Yet in the days leading up to the musicale, Theresa could not help replaying their conversations, analyzing each word and glance. There had been something in his manner, a directness, an absence of artifice, that resonated with her own suppressed longings for authenticity. Thursday arrived with trepidation and anticipation. The blue silk gown, while not the height of fashion, complemented Theresa's complexion and brought out the deeper hues in her eyes. Lady Agatha arranged Theresa's hair in a simple but elegant style, secured with the pearl combs. "Remember, this is an opportunity to enhance your standing in society through the Duke's notice," Lady Agatha instructed as their carriage approached Northbrook House, a magnificent residence on Grosvenor Square. "But do not presume too much upon his attention." The Duke himself greeted them in the entrance hall, a grand space with a sweeping marble staircase and walls adorned with ancestral portraits. "Lady Wilmington, Miss Huntington, welcome to Northbrook House." As he escorted them to the music room, Theresa noted the restrained elegance of the decor, quality without ostentation, wealth displayed through excellent taste rather than excessive ornamentation. The gathering was indeed small, perhaps 20 guests of varied ages. Theresa recognized several influential cultural patrons, including the elderly Countess of Radnor and Sir James Harrington, a renowned art collector. "I've seated you near the front," the Duke told Theresa. "Signora Bellini's expressions are as magnificent as her voice." The soprano proved extraordinary, performing Italian arias with passion and technical brilliance. Theresa found herself transporting, momentarily forgetting the social calculations that had dominated her recent existence. During the interval, the Duke introduced Theresa to several of his guests, presenting her opinions on art and music as worthy of consideration. She felt a strange sense of recognition in these conversations, as though, for once, the person she truly was aligned with the person she presented to society. Later, as refreshments were served, the Duke drew Theresa toward a small alcove where a magnificent painting hung, a Turner landscape of stormy seas and dramatic skies. "One of my favorites," he said. "Turner captures not just the appearance but the feeling of nature's power." "The beauty of unleashed force," Theresa agreed. "Terrifying yet magnificent." "You understand it," his voice held satisfaction. "Most see only tumultuous colors." "Because they look without seeing." She studied the painting's dramatic contrasts. "They observe the surface without sensing the depth." A common failing in many assessments, he turned toward her. "Including, I suspect, Lord Pembroke's evaluation of you." The direct reference to her broken engagement startled Theresa. "Your Grace, I..." Forgive my bluntness, but I've observed you these past weeks, Miss Huntington. You perform the role society has assigned, the dignified, chastened woman seeking redemption through proper behavior. Yet beneath that performance lies a mind of uncommon perception and a spirit of remarkable resilience. His assessment left her momentarily speechless. No one had ever seen her so clearly or valued what they saw. You credit me with qualities I'm not certain I possess, she finally said. On the contrary, I credit you with qualities you've been taught to devalue in yourself. His expression softened. The archery display was merely one small demonstration of your capabilities when you set aside others' expectations. A sudden commotion from the main drawing room interrupted their conversation. Voices rose in surprise and confusion. It seems something unexpected has occurred, the Duke said. Shall we investigate? They returned to find the guests gathered around a footman who had just delivered a newspaper. Lady Pemberton held it aloft, her expression scandalized. It's unconscionable, an evening edition of the Gazette with the most shocking allegations about Lord William Pembroke. Theresa's stomach clenched at the name. The Duke placed a steadying hand beneath her elbow. What allegations, Lady Pemberton? Someone asked. It claims he accumulated enormous gambling debts and only pursued Miss Simmons for her fortune after breaking his engagement to, she faltered, suddenly aware of Theresa's presence. After breaking his engagement to Miss Huntington, the Duke completed calmly, presumably because her portion was insufficient to cover his liabilities. All eyes turned to Theresa, expressions ranging from pity to morbid curiosity. The moment she had dreaded, public confirmation of her humiliation, had arrived in the worst possible setting. But instead of the crushing shame she expected, Theresa felt something unexpected: relief. If William had abandoned her for financial reasons rather than personal inadequacy, perhaps she wasn't fundamentally unworthy after all. Most unfortunate timing, the Duke said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Signora Bellini is prepared to continue her performance. Shall we return to the music? His calm authority redirected attention, and guests began moving back toward the music room. As they followed, the Duke spoke quietly to Theresa. I apologize for the awkwardness of the moment. Society's appetite for scandal is voracious. It's strange, she replied softly. I should feel mortified, yet I find myself oddly liberated. He studied her with that penetrating gaze. Because a false narrative has been corrected. Because perhaps I wasn't rejected for who I am, but for what I couldn't provide. The distinction felt profoundly important. Though I wonder at the timing of this revelation. Indeed, most convenient that truth emerges when it can no longer be suppressed. Something in his tone suggested deeper knowledge, but before Theresa could question him, they reached the music room, and conversation became impossible. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of music and subdued conversation. Lady Agatha, having heard about the Gazette article, maintained rigid composure while clearly calculating its implications for their social strategy. As guests departed, the Duke personally escorted Theresa and Lady Agatha to their carriage. I hope the evening's unexpected developments didn't entirely overshadow Signora Bellini's performance, he said. Not at all, Your Grace, Lady Agatha assured him. It was a magnificent cultural experience. Miss Huntington, he turned to Theresa, I wonder if you might permit me to call upon you tomorrow. There are matters I'd like to discuss. Lady Agatha answered before Theresa could speak. We would be honored to receive you, Your Grace, perhaps at 3 o'clock. Perfect, until tomorrow then. He bowed over Theresa's hand, his eyes conveying something her aunt couldn't see, a promise perhaps or a challenge. In the carriage, Lady Agatha could barely contain her excitement. The Duke of Northbrook calling upon you specifically, this exceeds all expectations, Theresa. And with Lord Pembroke's reputation now tarnished, your broken engagement appears providential rather than disastrous. It does seem a remarkable reversal, Theresa agreed, still processing the evening's events. Though I wonder who provided the Gazette with information about William's gambling debts. Someone who disliked his treatment of you, perhaps, Lady Agatha suggested. Or someone with a vested interest in Miss Simmons knowing the truth before she committed herself. or someone who wanted to remove the taint of inadequacy from my reputation. Theresa thought but did not say. The timing was too convenient, the revelation too perfectly aligned with her conversations with the Duke. That night, sleep eluded her as she contemplated the possibilities. The Duke's interest seemed genuine, but its nature remained uncertain. Was he merely a kind man offering friendship to someone unjustly judged, or did his attention suggest deeper regard? And if the latter, could she trust such regard, or was it merely another form of rescue, born of pity rather than genuine esteem? The following day passed with excruciating slowness as Theresa awaited the Duke's call. Lady Agatha supervised every detail of her appearance and the drawing-room's arrangement, instructing the servants to prepare the finest tea service. "Remember, this could be the most significant opportunity of your life," Lady Agatha said, as they heard a carriage approaching. "Be responsive without appearing eager, intelligent without being challenging." "Yes, Aunt." Theresa smoothed her dove-grey day dress, chosen for its elegant simplicity. The Duke arrived precisely at 3, bringing with him an air of quiet authority that transformed the drawing-room. After exchanging pleasantries with Lady Agatha, he turned to Theresa. "I wondered, Miss Huntington, if you might enjoy seeing the conservatory at Northbrook House. Lady Wilmington would be welcome to accompany us, of course." Lady Agatha immediately recognized the extraordinary nature of this invitation. "How thoughtful, Your Grace. Theresa adores botanical specimens, but I fear my rheumatism would make the dampness uncomfortable. Perhaps my companion, Mrs. Winters, could serve as chaperone." "She's just in the morning room." The arrangement was quickly established, and soon Theresa found herself in the Duke's carriage with Mrs. Winters, a middle-aged widow who served as Lady Agatha's paid companion. "I apologize for the somewhat unorthodox invitation," the Duke said, as they traveled the short distance to Northbrook House. "But I wanted to speak with you away from the constraints of a formal call, yet still with proper propriety." "Hence, Mrs. Winters," Theresa observed, nodding toward the companion who had discreetly opened a book. "Precisely. The conservatory offers both privacy and public visibility through its glass walls, ideal for conversation that requires candor." Upon reaching Northbrook House, they were conducted through the elegant corridors to the rear of the property, where a magnificent glass structure extended from the main building. Inside, tropical plants created a verdant sanctuary, with pathways winding between palm trees, exotic flowers, and bubbling fountains. Mrs. Winters settled on a bench near the entrance with her book, maintaining a proper distance while remaining in sight. "This is extraordinary," Theresa breathed, admiring the orchids that bloomed in riotous colors, "like discovering a piece of the tropics in London." "My mother's passion," the Duke explained. "She spent her childhood in India and missed its lushness when she came to England. My father built this for her 30th birthday." "A profound expression of regard," Theresa observed. "Yes. They had a rare marriage, one based on mutual respect and genuine affection." He guided her toward a small seating area surrounded by ferns. "Please, sit. What I wish to discuss requires some explanation." Theresa's pulse quickened as she took her seat. The Duke remained standing for a moment, as though gathering his thoughts, then sat opposite her. "Miss Huntington, I must confess something that may alter your opinion of me." His direct gaze held hers. "I was responsible for the Gazette article about Lord Pembroke's gambling debts." Though she had suspected as much, confirmation still startled her. "You? But how? Why would you involve yourself in such a matter?" "The how is simple enough. I've known the editor for years, and my secretary discovered Pembroke's financial situation through connections at his club." The Duke leaned forward slightly. "The why is more complex and relates directly to you." "To me," Theresa struggled to understand. "We barely knew each other when the engagement ended." "True, but I observed you at several events last season. Your intelligence, your quiet dignity, your discomfort with shallow social rituals. You intrigued me then, though we were never properly introduced." "You noticed me before the scandal." The notion seemed impossible. She had been entirely unremarkable, just another genteel young lady among dozens. "I notice what others overlook." His expression softened. "When I heard of Pembroke's treatment of you, I was displeased." Then I encountered you at Lady Pemberton's dinner and found the reality even more compelling than my observations had suggested. Theresa's mind raced to process these revelations. So you investigated Lord Pembroke's circumstances and exposed them too. What? Vindicate me. To correct an injustice, he said simply. Your reputation suffered for his dishonorable conduct. The truth deserved to be known. That was extraordinarily presumptuous of you, Your Grace. Despite her words, Theresa couldn't summon genuine indignation. The Duke's intervention had indeed liberated her from the most painful aspect of her humiliation, the belief that she had been found personally wanting. Presumptuous, yes, he acknowledged, but necessary, I believed, and effective. Why tell me now? You could have maintained your anonymity. Because I have a proposal that requires complete honesty between us. He held her gaze steadily. Miss Huntington, I find myself deeply drawn to you, your mind, your character, your quiet strength. I believe we could build a life of genuine partnership and mutual respect. I would be honored if you would consider becoming my wife. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The Duke of Northbrook, one of England's most eligible peers, was proposing marriage to her. After her public disgrace, and with full knowledge of her modest circumstances, Your Grace, I'm overwhelmed, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Surely you understand how unexpected this is. We've spoken only a handful of times. Sometimes a handful of genuine conversations reveals more than years of superficial interaction. His expression remained calm, though she detected tension in his posture. I don't expect an immediate answer. Take whatever time you need to consider. People will say you've acted from pity, she said, voicing her deepest fear, that you rescued a disgraced woman because of your notorious sense of justice. Let them say what they will. I know my own mind. He reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. I propose marriage not as rescue but as partnership. I believe we could build something rare together, a union of intellect, principle, and genuine affection. Affection, not love, the distinction registered even through her astonishment. The Duke offered respect, honesty, compatibility, but not the grand passion of romantic tales. Yet wasn't that more honest, more sustainable than dramatic declarations of undying love from a near stranger? The Duke saw her clearly and valued what he saw. Could she ask for more? You honor me beyond words, she said finally, but I would need time to consider such a life-altering decision. Of course, he released her hand with gentle reluctance. A week, perhaps. I'll call upon you next Friday for your answer. They walked back toward Mrs. Winters, who had maintained a discreet distance throughout their conversation. As they approached, the Duke spoke quietly. One more thing, Miss Huntington. Whatever your decision, know that I acted regarding Pembroke not to manipulate your circumstances, but to correct an injustice I found intolerable. My proposal stands independent of that intervention. I believe you, she said, and realized she did. The Duke's principles might be unconventional, but his integrity seemed unquestionable. The return journey passed in contemplative silence. Mrs. Winters, seemingly aware that something significant had transpired, maintained tactful focus on her book. When they arrived at Berkeley Square, the Duke escorted Theresa to the door with formal correctness. Until Friday, Miss Huntington. Until Friday, Your Grace. Inside, Lady Agatha waited with barely contained curiosity. Well, what transpired? The conservatory must have been magnificent. It was extraordinary, Theresa confirmed, moving toward the stairs. If you'll excuse me, Aunt, I find I need to rest. The humid atmosphere has given me a slight headache. She escaped to her room before Lady Agatha could press for details, needing solitude to process the astonishing turn of events. The Duke of Northbrook had proposed marriage to her, after arranging to clear her reputation. The enormity of it overwhelmed her. Marriage to the Duke would transform her circumstances entirely, elevating her from disgraced nobody to Duchess. Society would bow to her, doors would open, her family's position would be secured for generations. But beyond these practical considerations lay deeper questions. Could she be the partner he envisioned? Did his deep attraction constitute sufficient foundation for a lifetime commitment? And what of her own feelings? The flutter of excitement she experienced in his presence, the sense of being truly seen for perhaps the first time in her life, was that enough? Or was she contemplating another exchange, security for freedom, this time on a grander scale? The days that followed passed in a haze of uncertainty. Lady Agatha, having extracted the basic facts from Mrs. Winters, alternated between ecstatic planning and anxious coaching. "You must accept, of course," she declared. "Such an opportunity will never come again. A Duchess, Theresa, think of what that means for your family." "I am thinking of it, Aunt. But marriage is for a lifetime. I must be certain." "Certain of what? That he's wealthy, titled, and respectable. That he's chosen you despite having his pick of every eligible young woman in England." Lady Agatha shook her head in exasperation. "This is not a time for romantic nonsense." Yet it wasn't romantic nonsense that gave Theresa pause, but practical considerations of a different sort. The Duke lived a public life, entertaining foreign dignitaries, participating in Parliament, managing extensive estates. Could she, quiet, bookish, socially uncomfortable, fulfill the role of Duchess? Would she disappoint him, proving herself inadequate in yet another arena? On Wednesday, an unexpected visitor arrived, Mr. Crawford, who had called several times since the garden party, but whom Theresa had not seen since the Duke's proposal. "Miss Huntington," he greeted her, his manner more formal than in previous visits. "I hope I find you well." "Quite well, thank you," she replied, sensing his discomfort. "I'll come directly to the point. There are rumors circulating about the Duke of Northbrook's interest in you." He cleared his throat. "While I had hoped to develop our acquaintance further, I wouldn't presume to compete with a duke." Theresa felt a pang of sympathy for his obvious embarrassment. "You're very kind, Mr. Crawford. I've enjoyed our conversations." "As have I, which is why I wanted to speak with you directly rather than simply disappearing." He managed a small smile. "Mother says it's the gentlemanly approach." "Your mother is quite right. I appreciate your candor and wish you all happiness." After he departed, Theresa felt oddly relieved. Mr. Crawford had been pleasant company, but she had never felt the spark of genuine connection that she experienced with the Duke. His withdrawal simplified at least one aspect of her decision. Thursday brought a delivery from Northbrook House, a rare botanical text Theresa had admired in the conservatory, accompanied by a simple note: "Regardless of your answer, this belongs with someone who appreciates its true value." And the gesture touched her deeply. Unlike conventional courtship gifts, flowers or trinkets, this reflected specific knowledge of her interests and respected her intellect. The Duke was not attempting to sway her decision with luxury, but connecting with her genuine self. That evening, as Lady Agatha reviewed the next day's preparations for the Duke's call, Theresa came to her decision. It crystallized not through logical analysis, but through the sudden clarity of emotional certainty. The Duke saw her, truly saw her, and valued what he saw. He offered not merely status and security, but the possibility of partnership based on mutual respect. Perhaps it wasn't the passionate love of novels, but it was honest, substantial, and real, and her feelings for him. They had grown with each encounter, admiration deepening into genuine affection, interest blossoming into something that, given time, might indeed become love. "I will accept his proposal," she told Lady Agatha. Her aunt's relief was palpable. "Thank heavens, I've already started considering which modiste should create your trousseau. As a future Duchess, you must dress the part." "The Duke values substance over appearance, Aunt." "Nevertheless, appearances matter in his world. You must learn to navigate aristocratic society as effortlessly as you navigate your beloved books." Lady Agatha's expression softened slightly. "Though I admit, his appreciation for your unconventional qualities suggests a rare discernment." The following day dawned clear and bright, as though nature itself approved Theresa's decision. She chose her forest green day dress, the color the Duke had once complimented, and arranged her hair simply but elegantly. At precisely 3 o'clock, the Duke was announced. He entered the drawing room with his usual quiet authority, greeting Lady Agatha briefly before turning to Theresa. "Miss Huntington," he said, his voice carrying a note of tension she'd never heard before. "You're looking well." "Thank you, Your Grace, as are you." Lady Agatha rose promptly. "I'll leave you to your conversation. The door will remain open, of course, but I'll be in the morning room should you need me." Once they were relatively alone, the Duke took the seat opposite Theresa. For a moment, silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but weighted with significance. "Have you had sufficient time to consider my proposal?" he finally asked. "I have." Theresa met his gaze steadily. "Before I give my answer, may I ask one question?" "Of course. You've spoken of respect, partnership, and affection. These are solid foundations for marriage. But I wonder, do you believe deeper feelings might develop with time?" His expression softened. "I believe they already have, at least on my part. I use measured language not from lack of feeling, but from respect for honesty. Many men declare passionate love when they barely know the woman they court. I prefer to speak of what I know with certainty, while acknowledging that my regard grows daily." The sincerity in his voice reassured her. "Then my answer is yes, Your Grace. I would be honored to become your wife." Relief and joy transformed his austere features. He rose and moved to her side, taking her hand in his. "You've made me very happy, Theresa. May I call you Theresa now?" "Please do," she said, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "And I am Nicholas to you always." He raised her hand to his lips. "Not Your Grace or even Duke, except in formal settings." "Nicholas," she repeated, testing the intimacy of his name. He smiled, that genuine expression that transformed his face. "I have something for you." From his pocket, he withdrew a ring, not the ostentatious diamond one might expect, but a perfect sapphire surrounded by smaller diamonds in an antique setting. "This was my grandmother's. My mother always said it should go to a woman of substance and character." As he slipped it onto her finger, Theresa felt the weight of tradition and expectation, but also the promise of a future built on mutual understanding. "It's beautiful," she whispered, "like its wearer." He hesitated, then asked, "May I kiss you, Theresa, just once before propriety resumes its reign?" She nodded, her heart racing as he leaned forward and pressed his lips gently to hers. The kiss was brief but tender, a promise rather than a passion, yet it left her breathless nonetheless. When Lady Agatha returned minutes later, the betrothal was formally announced. She immediately launched into discussions of announcements, settlements, and wedding preparations, while the Duke listened with patient amusement. "We should allow society time to adjust to the news," he suggested. "Perhaps a small dinner party at Northbrook House next week to announce our engagement to close associates, followed by a notice in the Gazette." Lady Agatha readily agreed, already calculating the social advantage of being related to a duke. "Theresa's trousseau will require considerable attention, as a duchess." "As my wife," Nicholas corrected gently, "Theresa will have access to whatever she desires, but I value her exactly as she is." His gaze met Theresa's, conveying deeper meaning beneath the simple words. She had been valued not despite her ordinary qualities, but because of the extraordinary spirit those qualities concealed. In the weeks that followed, Theresa's life transformed with dizzying speed. The announcement of her engagement to the Duke created exactly the sensation Lady Agatha had anticipated. Invitations flooded in from people who had previously overlooked her existence. Former critics became obsequious admirers. Even Lord and Lady Pembroke sent congratulations, though William himself maintained a conspicuous silence. Through it all, Nicholas remained her anchor, steady, supportive, and refreshingly honest amid society's sudden adulation. "They worship the title, not the woman," he observed during a rare moment alone in his carriage after a social event. "But I have the privilege of knowing the woman herself." The wedding preparations advanced with aristocratic efficiency. Lady Agatha worked tirelessly to ensure every detail reflected the dignity of the Northwood lineage. The ceremony would take place at St. George's in Hanover Square, followed by a reception at Northbrook House. Theresa's family arrived from Hampshire, her father bemused by his daughter's extraordinary match, her younger sister wide-eyed at the splendor of aristocratic London. Her brothers, both military officers, treated Nicholas with respect that gradually warmed into genuine camaraderie. Through these family interactions, Theresa observed new dimensions of her betrothed: his patience with her father's simple country ways, his kindness to her star-struck sister, his genuine interest in her brother's military experiences. Each revelation deepened her growing affection. 1 week before the wedding, Theresa visited Northbrook House to review final arrangements for the reception. Nicholas had insisted she consider the mansion her home, encouraging her to direct any changes that would make it more comfortable for her arrival as its mistress. As they walked through the grand rooms, Nicholas's hand warm against her back, Theresa marveled at the journey that had brought her here. From abandoned bride to duchess-to-be in the space of 3 months, it seemed like a fairy tale, yet grounded in something more substantial than fantasy. "What are you thinking?" Nicholas asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "That life takes unexpected turns," she replied honestly. "If Lord Pembroke hadn't broken our engagement, I wouldn't be here now." "Ah, but you would. I would have found a way to meet you properly." He guided her toward the library, a magnificent room with floor-to-ceiling shelves and comfortable reading nooks. "I had already noticed you, remember?" "So you've said, though I still find it difficult to believe." "I was entirely unremarkable. To the unobservant eye, perhaps." He led her to a particular shelf where a space had been cleared. "I wanted to show you this. I've reserved this section for your personal collection. Whatever books you wish to bring from your father's house or acquire in the future, this space is yours." The gesture, so thoughtful, so aligned with her true self, moved Theresa deeply. "You truly do see me, don't you?" "I do." He turned to face her fully. "When I first proposed, I spoke of respect, partnership, and affection. Those foundations remain. But in these weeks together, my feelings have deepened beyond what I initially expressed." "As have mine," she admitted softly. He took her hands in his. "I believe I've fallen in love with you, Theresa. Not with the idea of you or the social advantage of marriage, but with you, your mind, your spirit, your quiet strength." The declaration, delivered with his characteristic directness, warmed her heart. This was no practiced flattery or poetic exaggeration, but honest emotion from a man who valued truth above all. "I love you too," she replied, the words emerging with surprising ease. Not the Duke, but Nicholas, the man who saw value where others saw mediocrity. He drew her closer. Never mediocrity. They simply lacked the vision to see the extraordinary woman before them. His kiss, unlike the brief, proper one they had shared upon their engagement, conveyed deeper passion, a promise of the partnership that awaited them. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Nicholas smiled. "1 week until you become the Duchess of Northbrook." "1 week until I become your wife," she corrected, echoing his earlier sentiment. "The title matters far less than that." On their wedding day, as Theresa prepared in a guest chamber at Northbrook House, Lady Agatha made a final inspection of her appearance. The wedding gown, ivory silk with delicate lace and seed pearls, transformed Theresa from the plain Miss Huntington into a woman of quiet radiance. "You look," Lady Agatha paused, uncharacteristically emotional. "Your mother would be proud." "Thank you, Aunt, for everything." Despite their differences, Theresa recognized that Lady Agatha's intervention had set her on this unexpected path. "I merely provided guidance." "You secured the Duke through qualities I scarcely recognized until he valued them." Her aunt adjusted a fold of the veil. "Perhaps there is something to be said for authenticity after all." The ceremony at St. George's proceeded with dignified splendor. Society's elite filled the pews, witnessing the union of the Duke of Northbrook with the formerly disgraced Miss Huntington. As Theresa walked down the aisle on her father's arm, she caught a glimpse of Lord Pembroke in the congregation, his expression unreadable. But her attention quickly returned to the man waiting at the altar, tall, distinguished, his eyes fixed on her with undisguised admiration. This was no rescue, she realized with absolute clarity. This was recognition, two people who saw each other's true worth beyond society's shallow judgments. "Dearly beloved," the bishop began, "we are gathered here today." The traditional words washed over Theresa as she stood beside Nicholas, their hands joined. When they exchanged vows, his voice remained steady and sure, while hers carried the emotion of a journey from abandonment to love. "I now pronounce you man and wife." The bishop's declaration sealed their union before God and society. "Your Grace, you may kiss your bride." Nicholas lifted her veil with gentle hands. "My Duchess," he whispered, for her ears alone, before claiming her lips in a kiss that balanced propriety with genuine affection. As they turned to face the congregation, Theresa felt a profound sense of rightness. The path that had begun with humiliation had led to authentic happiness, not because of wealth or title, but because one man had seen beyond social conventions to the woman beneath. The reception at Northbrook House overflowed with London's elite, all eager to congratulate the new Duchess of Northbrook. Theresa received their felicitations with gracious dignity, no longer intimidated by their scrutiny. Beside her, Nicholas maintained a protective presence, his hand often finding hers amid the social whirl. Lord Pembroke approached them during a brief lull, his manner stiffly formal. Your Grace, he acknowledged them both. My congratulations. Thank you, Pembroke, Nicholas replied with cool civility. William's gaze shifted to Theresa. I wish you every happiness, Duchess. I appreciate the sentiment, Lord Pembroke. Theresa's response held neither bitterness nor triumph, merely the serenity of someone who had found her place in the world. After he moved away, Nicholas squeezed her hand. You've handled yourself with remarkable grace. I feel only gratitude now, she confessed. His actions led me here to you. As the reception continued, Theresa observed the varied reactions of guests, the genuine well-wishers, the envious, the calculating. She had entered a world of complex social hierarchies and political alliances, yet she felt strangely unintimidated. With Nicholas beside her, she could navigate any challenge. Late in the evening, as the celebration continued, Nicholas drew her away from the crowd toward the conservatory, the place where he had proposed. I thought you might appreciate a moment of peace, he said, leading her through the verdant sanctuary to the same secluded bench. You've performed admirably as Duchess, but I suspect you're nearing your limit for social pleasantries. You truly do know me, she said, gratefully sinking onto the bench. Though I find I'm more capable of such things than I once believed. Because you no longer doubt your worth, he sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. That was always your only limitation, not your intelligence or beauty or social grace, but your belief in your own inadequacy. A belief you helped dispel. She turned to face him, this man who had transformed her understanding of herself. When you found me, I was defined by abandonment. Now I'm defined by choice, yours and mine. The best choice I've ever made. He traced the curve of her cheek with gentle fingers. My heart was waiting for you, Theresa, though I scarcely recognized its emptiness until I found you. In the privacy of the conservatory, surrounded by exotic blooms and the gentle splash of fountains, the Duke of Northbrook kissed his Duchess with the passion they had restrained in public, a kiss that spoke of present joy and future promise. Theresa responded with equal fervor, no longer the hesitant, uncertain woman who had feared her own inadequacy. In Nicholas's love, she had discovered her own worth, not as society defined it through beauty or accomplishment or wealth, but as one soul recognizing and valuing another. We should return to our guests, she said when they finally parted, though she made no move to rise. They can wait a moment longer. He held her close, his heartbeat steady beneath her palm. We have a lifetime ahead of us, Theresa, a lifetime of partnership, respect, and love. From abandonment to abundance, she murmured, thinking of the journey that had brought her here. From false beliefs to truth, he countered, understanding as always the deeper current of her thoughts. Later that night, as their carriage departed for the Northwood country estate where they would spend their honeymoon, Theresa gazed back at the illuminated windows of Northbrook House. Society's elite continued their celebration, but she was leaving behind more than a reception. She was leaving behind the woman she had been, the woman who believed herself unworthy of genuine love. Nicholas took her hand, the warmth of his touch anchoring her to the present moment. Happy, my Duchess. Profoundly, she replied, turning away from the past to face her future, a future built not on society's approval or conventional expectations, but on the solid foundation of being truly seen, valued, and loved. The carriage moved forward into the night, carrying them toward their new life together, a life neither could have predicted months earlier when Theresa had read William's letter of abandonment. That rejection, once devastating, now seemed a necessary step on the path to genuine happiness. For in being abandoned by her betrothed, Theresa Huntington had discovered the Duke waiting with a heart full of love, a love based not on illusion or advantage, but on the recognition of her true self and the belief in her intrinsic worth. And in that recognition, she had found not just a husband, but her own strength, her own value, and her own capacity for love beyond anything she had dared to imagine.